the James City County Board of Supervisors to order for the purpose of a business meeting. Mr. Stevens, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Here. We need a motion to allow Ms. Sadler to participate electronically due to a health-related issue. Do I have a motion to include her?
Yes, so moved.
Mr. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Sue, welcome to the meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, we'll have a number of items on today's agenda. We're going to start off with a couple of presentations. And the first, delighted to welcome to the podium Dean Lynch, the Executive Director of the Virginia Association of Counties. Mr. Lynch is a very important part of the representation for counties in Richmond and a great source of information, education, and training for county supervisors and the county government by and large. So welcome. Thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's good to be here, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Stevens. I'm Dean Lynch, Executive Director of the Virginia Association of Counties. And for some of you who may not be familiar with Virginia Association of Counties, or VACo, we were founded in 1934 to support the efforts of county officials through education programs, through advocacy, and through our business development services. And thank you for making it possible for me to be here today to be in this stunning part of the Commonwealth of Virginia to recognize Ms. Ruth Larson and her achievements in the Certified Supervisors Program. A little bit about Ms. Larson's program that she went through is this program was founded in 2006. We have had over 100 graduates of the program representing 40 counties across the Commonwealth. Ms. Larson completed over 100 education hours to complete this certificate program, and this program is affiliated with the Virginia Association of Counties and Virginia Tech. So congratulations, Ms. Larson, on completing this program, and it's good to be here today to award her her certificate and her pins. This will be in our County Connections newsletter.
Good.
And also and Scott, please, because you have helped me so much.
I have to take this off too.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Congratulations to Ms. Larson.
Thank you.
We'll be reading your term papers to make sure that they caught all the typographical errors.
Well, it's a great program. I have to say, I'm so glad that I did it. And I really appreciate everything that VACo staff puts into it. I appreciate all the support of my colleagues and all the help from county staff. And I learned so much. And as with any VACo program, really, one of the best parts about it is the collaboration with people all across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so you learn not only things about your own county and counties like yours, but counties that are nothing like yours either. So, but I really appreciate, this is a very busy time for VACo. They're dealing with the General Assembly and issues that are happening there. And I know that Dean is headed back immediately to go to committee meetings, but I really appreciate you coming down, Dean. Thanks.
And I would point out that Ms. Larson, as she completed her certification program, was also elected second vice chair of VACo at our annual meeting this year. So congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
We now have a presentation from one of our favorite groups, the James City County Clean County Commission, and its chair, Peg Borman, is here today.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Stevens, can you hear me? Excuse my voice, it comes and goes. Good afternoon, I'm Peg Borman. I'm from downtown Lightfoot, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm back. I'm going to talk a little trash, just like I used to, so don't think that I have gone away anywhere. But I want to give you a presentation from our Clean County Commission. I thought maybe some of our members would be here, but I guess they can't make it. We have Charles Lattiman from Berkeley, Kevin Radcliffe from Roberts, Tim Wim-Stanley, he's also from Roberts, Rachel West is from Berkeley, Heath Richardson is from Stonehouse, and Emma just finished her term with us this past fall, and she's decided she's not going to stay because she's going to be moving back to New York or something as soon as school's out. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that we have some good news about a lot of things. We have a newsletter that was launched this month, and it's called All Hands on Deck. Perhaps you all might have got one. I think Cassie sent it out email. We also did a podcast the end of December, and it was, I think, a success. We had a lot of feedback on it. We're happy to have Heath Richardson with us. I forgot to say that. He's been a volunteer with the Boy Scouts and a lot of other things that we've done, but he's with us now on the commission, and we're very glad to have him. One of the beginning, we've just launched a program this past fall it's called Litter League, and it's litter cleanup kits, and we developed these things, different kits to be passed out at the libraries, and you can check out a kit and go out and clean up something and turn it back in, and then we have a report form. We've had 8 checkouts since November, and right now we've got 2 that are circulating in each of the libraries from Croker and Williamsburg. A group can also be formed, and a team can go to the office or Tuning Road and check out a kit and keep it as long as they want, as long as they're working with it. Because each library does have 5 kits each, and we have the ones at Tuning Road. We also have the stewardship hour. Emma was real instrumental in getting this started, and we have the different topics are available on the website or on YouTube, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 10 different topics that she put together, and that's was very popular with a lot of people because we had volunteers that worked with it as well as some the topics that she had. The Litter and Recycling Expo in 2020. I don't think I've ever seen it rain as hard as it did that day, but it started about 8:30 and didn't let up until about 8:30 that night. But and thank you, Mr. McGlennon, for coming out and supporting us during that time frame. We all looked like drowned rats, and because there was cats and dogs raining as well as raindrops. Also, the results from that, we broke it down, and Evan Haney, Holly's son, he volunteered with us that year, and he was very instrumental in getting all the statistics about every car that came in. And of course, it was in conjunction with the hazardous waste that was on the other side of the school. And so a lot of them came through us because they'd forgot to put their sign out. So he was very instrumental in getting all the information there, because we had from James City, we had 103 cars with 136 people. We had from Williamsburg, there were 18 cars with 25 people. York County had 3 with 5 people, and we had 2 cars that came from New Kent and with 2 people. So we had 126 cars, 168 people counted from 4 jurisdictions. So that it could have been considered a success, I guess, even though it was very wet. But the 2021 was much more successful. We didn't do the tracking of where people came from, but we did have 148 cars, 72 bags that were that came in, 10 to restore, 53 for shredding, 14 tires, 10 for the glass, and 18 for shoes and clothing, 328 pounds of plastic. We had actually, I'm not sure about this, but I thought we had more than 14 tires. We had 132 tires that actually came in. And then we had 155 pairs of shoes that came for the soles for shoes, and 564 pieces of clothing. And all that kept, saved 4,650 pounds of carbon dioxide emissions that were not released into the environment. And we had 3,000 pounds of paper. That seemed to be the most popular part of it. And it was a cold day, but it was a sunny day. So, and then we had Earth Day. We planted a tree out at the Botanical Gardens, and it was a new adventure for us. And we hope that it's going to be a new tradition for us, because in the past we've celebrated Arbor Day with the Williamsburg garden clubs, and an Earth Day was celebrated with us doing the spring cleanup. So this year, this past year, we had I don't remember what kind of tree it was. It might have been a black gum. I'm not really sure. But this year we're going to be planting an American chestnut, and that will be on Arbor Day in April. The Will Barnes Day, we had 60 volunteers that came. And thank you, Mr. Eisenhower, for joining us. We had the James City Ruatan Club gave the presentation of Will Barnes, Jim Robertson. Some of you might remember Jim Robertson. He was one of the first ones that started the Queen County Commission, along with Eula Radcliffe. We had the recipient for that. She was from War Hill, and I can't remember her name now. But we also dedicated the Will Barnes shelter, which had never been done, because the first one we had a storm. We always seem to have storms and rain and things happening with us. But the first one, we forgot to do it, and I said, well, we haven't done it, so we're going to do it. So we had a ribbon cutting for the shelter, as well as the flower boxes James City Rutan's had installed. And we had a nice volunteer from the county that agreed to do it for us. So it was very much appreciated. This year, I want to invite all of you to come on June 18th. It's going to be our Volunteer Appreciation Day. So I'm gonna hold you all to it now that you got an invitation. The Pollinator and Rain Gardens was at Veterans Park also. And we had the first planting event was on May 8th. And there was a great number of volunteers, and I tried my best to get everybody to sign up, but somehow or other, I didn't get them all. But we had so many people, it was just gratifying to see that many people out there. As you can see the picture, there's a large number of them. That wasn't even all of them because some of them had already left. But the James City Ruatan Club planted the garden, as you can see over here on the left, at the same time. But, and we had another planting in the September for the fall planting. And the sign was designed and installed, and Cassie spent a lot of time on this sign. We want to make sure everybody takes a look at that sign when they're out there. And we have, in March, again, we had the Great American Cleanup. That was on the 26th and 27th. And we had 6 or 7 teams. I can't remember exactly what the number was, but we had people out cleaning up in different areas of the county. We also had the spring cleanup on April 17th. We initiated Cassie very well that day. It was her last day before she ended up having the baby. So we gave her a real initiation on that day. And we had 94 volunteers that came. I think it was 22 or 3 different organizations that signed up for that. And there was one big team from the county that John Cornifax headed up, and there was a lot of you out there, I think, for that. And it was really great to have so many people that came out for it. But we had 94 volunteers total with 238 hours completed. And we also had the Oak Tree Hunt Club, which we had 119 tires. I think on your sheet it might have 27. We had 119 tires. And the Oak Tree Hunt Club, they go down in the ravines out there in Stonehouse area near their club. And some of them, I think they risk life and limb for it to get those tires up out of those ravines because there was so many of them. And they do a real good job. We had 176 bags with a total of 2.5 tons of litter that was collected. And we spent $575 out of the grant money to pay for the tires and the litter being disposed of. And we cleaned up 42.5 miles within the county. Now, was another picture of the cleanup. I put a couple of things on your desk that from the litter index. We didn't have time to get it in before we had to have our presentation in. So we did the litter index on January 8th. We would plan to do it in November or October, November, and of course I wasn't able to do it at that time. And so I'm glad I was able to get out and do it, but there's some comparisons there. One of them is, well, we did all of these on the watershed, and the one is just for this year, the one with the 5 colors on it. That was for just for this year, and as you can look at this, you can tell the 1.4 is the scoring that we get. There was 7 people that went. We had 4 commissioners and Regina and Cassie from the county, and everybody did a scoring of how they thought the litter was. And then the other one is the comparison it gives you from 2020, when we did that one in November, and then we did another one in, we did January of 20, and then November of 20, and then we didn't do 21 until this year. And you can see that some of the areas, each one of the colors is a watershed, and it gives you the comparison as the scoring as how it was done. And overall, I feel like we had really good results from it, because some places stayed about the same, some were greatly improved, and unfortunately we had some litter, but not nearly as much as I've seen in the past. And so it's just kind of a good comparison for you. The Adopt-A-Spot, this sign is from the War Hill High School Environmental Club, and they aren't our newest, but they were new last year. Jamestown senior class of last year, they have adopted the area over by the 4-H camp near the on the Capitol Trail, and they're our newest group. And each year the sign will have the senior class on that, like 21, 20, 22, so forth, will be on that sign. Kevin and I toured the 8 spots that we now have, and most of them were very well maintained. People have done a good job of getting out there and cleaning it up. And but we did find that on the 8th of January, Endeavor Road was very clean. We went back on the 14th, then on Friday, and there was all kinds of trash scattered up and down there, and it was just so, it was disgusting to see that much trash. And but we informed the right person to get it cleaned up, and I haven't been down, but I'm sure that's been cleaned up since then. But this is a very profitable thing that we do, and that's having Adopt-A-Spots. We've had 3 campaigns. We do 3 campaigns. We have the recycling education. We have the magnets and literature that we pass out at any event we have, and trying to educate people about it. Also, we can compare how much waste is minimized by recycling in the program that we have curbside. The problem with that is that a lot of the plastic and stuff that was being recycled can't be recycled now, and so that's going into the trash. But Clean County was instrumental in getting the glass recycling started with Owens, Illinois, and we're very happy about that. And that came about last fall. And we're still working on the zero tolerance for litter. As you can see, we're with Keep James City County Beautiful and Keep America Beautiful. That's we do this litter index. And with the spring cleanup, of course, that's a more magnified. And then we've got the new program with the Litter League. And under the beautification, we've got the Adopt-A-Spot and the pollinator garden, but also the Good Neighbor grant is we had only one application for 2021, and they requested money for their volunteers. Well, we couldn't approve that because that was not part of the program, and but they're still they're good neighbors, and they've cleaned up everything in their area, and that was Seasons Trace. we've got 4 for the 21-22, and the first checks have been received, and the final project is completed by April 30th, and the checks will be going out in May. And so finally, overall, we've had 26 litter cleanups with 238 volunteers and 943 volunteer hours valued at $23,094. And 20 groups did displays or presentations, and we've had approximately 1,359 people in attendance. So, first of all, I wrote down here, I wasn't sure which Mr. Larson or Mrs. Larson or Mr. Eisenhower will be needing to get us a replacement for Emma, because she's from Jamestown. So, but from Stonehouse, we now have 2. That's myself and Heath. Jamestown, there is nobody. Berkeley has 2. Roberts has 2. I picked on John for many years, so we finally got a couple. But Mr. Hipple, Mr. Hipple, we can use 2 right there. Well, we can use at least 2 in each district. And I've talked long enough. I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Borman, for your always informative presentations, and ask if the board, if anybody would like to ask any questions or comment.
You did say June 18th is when the Will Barnes Day will be, the Will Barnes Day picnic?
It's the 18th, June 18th.
Okay, thank you.
And we haven't set the time, but it usually is right around 2 o'clock, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Peg, it's Sue. I just wanted to say hi from afar. Thank you for everything you're continuing to do. It's so nice to see you at the podium again. And I just did want to give a shout out to everybody who does participate in the litter pickups, and a little personal note to my grandsons. I saw their pictures up there, so they've been helping out. So got to give a shout out to my kiddos as well. It's a great thing for kids to help out with, because it really gives them incentive to not be some of those folks who throw things out of your car windows, and will make litter pickups a lot easier for everyone. So thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate the accolades. It's all for the Clean County Commission. It's not me, but I'm just up here talking.
Well, Ms. Borman, it is in large part due to the efforts that you put into this. You are a dedicated volunteer who has really managed to, I won't say pester us, but make sure that we get representation on the Clean County Commission to help you in that task. I'm very sorry to hear that we'll be losing Emma, because she has really made a significant contribution to the program, stepping up to help out as co-chair for a while, and developing new programs and so forth, and getting young people involved at her school. So that's all been great, and we will miss her very much when she leaves at the end of the school year. But the real test is that you are able to motivate other people to get involved as well, not just the members of the commission, but all those volunteers out there. And we really do appreciate the work you put in, and know that you'll continue to keep us aware of the need to keep the county clean and to do a better job of discouraging litter. So you didn't really lose your voice. It's great to see you in such good spirits and so healthy. And thank you very much for your presentation.
It's nice to be back, and thank you for all that. And we appreciate all your support.
Okay, we'll now move to the consent calendar, and we have a very large consent calendar. I'm going to go through very quickly and then see if anybody has anything they'd like to remove for further information or discussion. We have acceptance of housing vouchers grant. We have additional appropriations of $220,000 for the 2019 Scattered Site Housing Rehabilitation Community Development Block Grant. We have 2021 Scattered Site Housing Rehabilitation Community Development Block Grant, adoption of the amended Housing Rehabilitation Program design. We have a competitive grant award of $16,000 for litter prevention and recycling program. We have the contract award of $127,000 for the automatic cardiopulmonary resuscitation devices. We have a contract award of $245,738 for emergency communication center HVAC backup. We have dedication of streets in Mason Park subdivision, dedication of streets in Section 6 of Peleg's Point subdivision, grant award of $28,000 for Bulletproof Vest Partnership. We have a grant award of $47,797 for the Commonwealth Attorneys, the VSTOP Grant Program Fund. Grant award of $24,651 fiscal year 2022 digital forensics training for investigators. Grant award of $33,333 for fiscal year 2022 law enforcement officer safety and wellness, addressing psychological needs of law enforcement. A grant award of $17,991 for litter prevention and recycling program. Grant award of $16,000 for the State Homeland Security Program. Almost done here. And grant award of $5,000 for Williamsburg, from the Williamsburg Health Foundation for the 2021 emergency management. And finally, adoption of a set of minutes from previous board meetings. Do I have a motion? Did anybody wish to pull anything from this agenda?
I'll make the motion. I don't wish to pull anything. I just had a couple of questions, but it can be made after the approval of the consent
Fine.
agenda. So I'll make the motion for
Motion
approval.
to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Larson.
So first of all, as I was looking through these grants, kudos to staff for the aggressiveness of trying to go after so much and to address so many needs. I'm sure that doesn't address all the needs of these particular programs, but it is a step. I think it does help. And so, and they just were all such worthwhile issues. I was curious about the law enforcement, safety and wellness, addressing the psychological needs of law enforcement. Is this something that we had done before? Is this going to be something new? It looked like we were going to be working part-time, but maybe if you could just talk a little bit about that, Chief?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Board.
Good afternoon.
Chief.
This is something we're doing new. It's an initiative to look out for the officers, their welfare, and take care of them as a part of the James City County family. So we're looking forward to it. It's an ongoing contract. We're working with a certain provider, and it's ongoing as we go through the year.
So would an officer, will it be something that will be open to any officer? And I'm assuming it will be anonymous and I'm not, but between them and the person who they'll be talking with, et cetera?
Absolutely. And they can go on their own. It'd be mandatory, but they'll be meetings. Also, educational piece is very important in that as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then the only other thing that got and this was Chief Ash, it was the Community Animal Response Team. I just wondered if you could just talk about that for a moment.
Afternoon, Chief.
So that team is, it started after Hurricane Sandy. A lot of the regulations changed. When we do sheltering, we have to also make sure we're providing opportunities for animals. So when we bring those animals to the shelter, we have to have a group who's willing to help take care of them. So some of the basic things like taking your dog out for a walk, things like that during a shelter, the owners would be responsible for. But when they're in a separate area of the shelter, making sure that they're taken care of, have food, those types of things. So those are another volunteer group.
Okay.
Many of ours are all CERT members that help take care of the animals at the shelter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And thanks to all the staff who've come out today to answer any questions we might
Yes.
have about those items.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to board discussion. We have 5 items with us today, and we're going to begin with Sean Gordon and Tony Bell on the James City County Facilities Master Plan update.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Stevens. We're here today to provide an update for the facilities master plan. With me is Tony Bell, the managing principal for Mosley Architects, and Andrew McVeigh, the project manager with Mosley Architects. Building on the space needs assessment, the facilities master plan provides a roadmap to meet the county space needs for the next 20 years for the most critical facilities. At the 75% stage, you were presented with two options for county administration facilities. Now at the 100% stage, the preferred option has been identified as the master plan. Some of the narratives in the document that you now have includes an additional option primarily in the public safety sector, and that's going to be identified as an alternate concept. Cost estimates were developed for all the facilities master plan options and projected out for the year 2040. The facilities master plan does include the Williamsburg-James City County School Administration and Williamsburg-James City County Court functions. Scheduled presentations with the school board we have at the next regular meeting in February, and we're tentatively scheduled with the courthouse earlier that day. With that, I'll now turn it over to Tony Bell with Mosley Architects to provide the update through a PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Sean. Mask on or off, Mr. Chairman?
Your choice, sir.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Stevens, I'm glad to be before you this afternoon with a completed project. The study is pretty much wrapped up, and we can discuss next steps at the conclusion of the presentation. But I'm really here to answer any questions you might have, as well as just kind of summarize where we've been and the conclusions that were reached. So back in 2020, we completed a space needs assessment, and that looked at all the existing space available for county facilities. It looked at the current personnel populations within the county departments, and then it also anticipated growth for those departments in the form of both personnel and physical space. And this document was then used to create the facilities master plan to fulfill those 2040 space needs. The level of detail, this is not a, so if you ask me what color is the carpet going to be in the new fill in the blank building, we're not there yet. This is a big picture diagram. It's an overview. It doesn't provide specific detailed direction, but it should be used as a guide as the county then moves forward with development of the individual projects to meet those 2040 space needs. And it's also a living document. As you find you go through the next 10 years, the needs of these different departments are going to change. The important thing, as I stressed to Mr. Stevens before the meeting, is you've now got a plan. And you can update that plan periodically and check off boxes as you implement different projects. And then you will keep moving that time frame out so that you always know where you're going to be the next 10, the next 20 years. It'll never be in the dark anymore for you. A really sensitive advancer, so I apologize if I. All right. So preliminary budget estimates, as Sean said, were developed for each aspect of the project and then collectively for each group of projects. So we may have looked at admin, human services, public safety. And those projects were based on 2021 dollars, and then we took those 2021 dollars and escalated them over the next 20 years based on a 3% annual escalation. So as you can imagine, that gets to be a pretty big number, okay? But again, it's not something that the county has to bite off all at one time. It's something that you will create a plan for and plan for over the next 20 years and beyond. So the plan looks at the most critical needs of the facilities. You know, this is not a wish list. This is a needs assessment. Going backwards here. So these are the 2021 needs there in the leftmost column. That's the budget for county administration, school administration, and the Williamsburg-James City County Courts. You'll see the total budget is $298 million, a rather large figure. But then as you escalate that over the next 20 years, it becomes almost $500 million or a little more than $500 million. But again, these are all of the projects. These are all of the needs for the entire county. And, you know, in the terms of the courts, it's city and county. In the terms of schools, it's city and county in terms of that school administration need. So let's look at some of these projects individually and where we ended up. And as Sean said, we developed what was called the master plan, and then we also have the alternative concepts. We're only going to look at the master plan today. These are only the blue diagrams as they're indicated in your final facilities master plan study. So the Opportunity Way, what we'll refer to as the War Hill site, has basically two sites on it. One is the Opportunity Way site. The other is being referred to as the Water Tower site. So the Opportunity Way site includes what's already existing, which is the Law Enforcement Center, the LEC, a future administration building, a future Fire Station 6, a future Fire Training Center, and a future Fire Administration Warehouse, as well as the Williamsburg-James City County School Administration Office. So 5 of those facilities don't even exist today. 1 does, and 1 will be expanded on. And for those of you who have already toured the Law Enforcement Center, you said, Tony, why do we need to do anything with that? You don't have to do anything for that in the short term. It has 10 years of growth built in due to the foresight of yourselves and the folks who plan that facility. So it has no growth needs in the first 10. But remember, this is a 20-year plan. So we've looked at the 20-year need, and 20 years out, yeah, there's going to be some growth of the police department. So we need a plan for that. So the Law Enforcement Center is at the very top of this screen. You see a small addition and also a covered parking area plan for it. And then you see the other buildings identified, the Fire Station 6, there on the bottom right-hand corner, behind it, the Fire Training Center, behind it, the Fire Administration Warehouse. Then between Fire Station 6 and the Law Enforcement Center, you see 2 buildings, one of which, the square building, is the School Administration Building, and then a future County Administration Building. And all the detail is all in the study, both in terms of the space needs and the dollar figures associated with the same. So at the Water Tower site at War Hill, we've got 6 facilities being proposed. That's the General Services Administration Building, the General Services Warehouse, the General Services Fleet Maintenance. Currently, they share the site with the JCSA, so we're moving them. The Fire Training Burn Building, the Fire Training Residential Facility, and then the Fire Training Tower. And those are all practical training, okay, as opposed to classroom training, which would still be over at the Opportunity Way site. All told, these projects, all 6, total $47 million. And you see how those currently lay out. That access road there is a road that's currently not owned by the county, but could be developed by the county or an agreement worked out with the current owner to best serve the county's needs. And you see how the 6 facilities are planned there right surrounding the Water Tower site. So moving on, the ECC expansion, okay, the actual call center would move out of where it is now next to Fire Station 1. That would move into the County Administration Building. And the Satellite Services Facility and the other facility that's in there would remain. Fire Station 1 would be expanded. Again, that's not a short-term project, that's a long-term project. Reminder, 20-year space needs. So over the next 20 years, there's going to need to be some growth at Fire Station 1. There's likely also going to need to be some renovation. As fire services change, as systems fail, that building will need to be renovated. So again, we're trying to forecast and plan for those needs so that the county is not caught shorthanded. Fire Station 2 is a little undersized, so we need to put about a 6,700 square foot expansion on that building. The existing Fire Station 22 is currently used as a logistics warehouse. We're going to replace that, and then that facility can either be used for county storage or demolished if the county sees fit. And this would be about a $6.8 million addition and renovation to Fire Station 2. Fire Station 3, we were proposed replacing the bays so as to face them right toward John Tyler Highway and give them better logistical operation of their existing facility. The existing bays could be renovated to serve either storage needs or dormitory fitness needs of the fire station. Fire Station 4 is pretty well sized, but still needs a little short of 2,000 square feet of expansion, again, over the next 20 years. And Fire Station 5, similar to Fire Station 2, needs some more bay space. So we're proposing a bay, basically they're planned south of the existing station. The JCSA would then at that point occupy this entire campus. And we're proposing that the existing buildings there right on Tuning Road in the northeast corner would be demolished. Those are basically where General Services is now. And a consolidated facility be built for JCSA. We'll keep the operations facility, but now we're going to build a 2-story administration wing and then a 1-story operations wing with bays and things of that nature. So the skinny leg that you see facing Tooney Road, that would be the administration portion of that building. The rather large fat leg that comes to the south would be the operations portion. And again, we're not picking colors at this point. This is a big picture analysis. We just want to confirm that the building can fit on the site and meet the need to move things forward. The CCC would remain in their existing facility and get a renovation in that facility, and the registrar would move into this facility, and also we would renovate that facility for them. Human Services, Old Town Medical would move out of this facility, and Social Services would at that point occupy the entire facility. So this may very well be a 2-step process. Once when Old Town moves out, renovate their vacated space, and maybe a future project where you would do a 3,700 square foot expansion onto that building for that, again, the 20-year need. And a lot of these aspects have, that 1-2, where you do something in the short term and then maybe do something else again in the long term. You don't want to be doing projects every year, but by slicing it up into smaller phasing portions, you can make them more affordable, right? And that's a strategy that the county has utilized many times over the past 50 years. The rec center would have some additional administration space, and that would basically be toward Long Hill Road. And the strategy here is it's adjacent to these multi-purpose rooms, so that this administration wing could also use these multi-purpose rooms for overflow and flex space. The solid waste facility would have a new 1,500 square foot facility to replace a facility that has served its useful life. And this is your existing campus, and the future of it is yet to be decided. So that concludes the presentation. I'm here to answer any questions you may have, or if you've looked through the study at all, any questions with regard to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bell at this time?
So next steps, you may ask, is, Tony, those are some big numbers you threw out. The next steps is cutting those big numbers into smaller numbers and starting to move them along the calendar to create CIP projects. We want to do X in 5 years. We want to do Y in 7. We want to do Z in 10. So that all those 20-year space needs are met and no one goes unneeded. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it's important to understand that the numbers that you presented us today, looking at the cost in 2021, the cost in 2030, cost in 2040, presumably we're not looking at any one of those three, but rather this is kind of a continuum, so that some of these kinds of projects would be addressed in the near future. Some would probably be 10 years out, some closer to 20 years out, and so the cost
or more.
Yes, right. Right. I think when you even when you look at that large number, the $522 million, the $500 million price tag, if we were doing everything in 2040 dollars, it's important to remember we're doing that over a 20-year period as well.
That's right, and that would be the case if the county sat on its hands for the next 20 years and did nothing.
Right.
And so we're not going to do anything and then wait for those needs to just keep stacking up.
But it's also clear that this is not the entirety of our capital improvements. There are going to be other issues that we are dealing with as well,
Yes, sir.
whether it's in terms of other educational facilities or parks and recreation facilities and so forth that may not be included in this particular inventory.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. And I didn't clarify that, but schools, specifically the instructional space, were not included in this study. That is outside of the scope.
I guess connecting the dots on this, it would probably be appropriate to talk about it maybe later when we're talking about the FY 23-24 budget input, is how we get these projects sort of rank ordered in the order of need, and then how that translates into the proposed budget that's brought forward to us, because the CIP there should be looking at least 5 or 10 years on this so that we have a reasonable figure of, I guess, the discussion at that point would be the plan on how staff would plan on going about doing that and presenting us with your recommended list of things that should be tackled first in sort of a rank order and how you would plan on building that into the CIP.
Yes, sir. Mr. Eisenhower, some of those projects are already making its way through our CIP, so that shouldn't be a surprise. And then there are others that will shift as we go forward in time, much to what Mr. Bell had suggested. So,
Any other questions, comments?
No, I don't really have a question, so to speak. Thank you very much. Just that it's a very big number. I'm sure very scary to people that might be watching from home. But some things are, I mean, as you say, this is not a wish list. This is very much what we need to operate. So I look forward to working with county administration on how we're going to proceed and work through it. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell, Mr. Gordon, and all those who participated in this process for the hard work that went into it, I know. All right. So our second discussion item is looking at minimum wage impacts analysis, and that's Patrick Teague.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. I'm here to discuss recent changes to Virginia's minimum wage, upcoming changes, James City County's plan, and what some of the impacts from that will be. Apparently I need technical help. All right, so the Commonwealth of Virginia has approved legislation, which you're probably aware of, that this past January, minimum wage moved from $9.50 to $11 per hour. Next January, we will move from 11 to 12 per hour. Following slides will summarize some of those impacts. So to comply with 12 an hour by 2023, employees will migrate from 3 to 4 and 5 to the higher grade 6. Additionally, grade 6 will increase by 1 penny to be 12 an hour. And the resulting modified pay scale, salary range 6 will be our new minimum, and that will mean we're in compliance with minimum wage of 12 an hour. So what does that look like for us? We have approximately 1,100 employees. 75% of those are full-time. We currently have no full-time employees that earn less than $12 an hour, and you can see there the impacts for the non-full-time employees are broken out with 43 less than 11 and 34 under the 12 an hour. So those 264 non-full-time, there's 43 that are impacted by the 11 an hour change, and the 12 an hour change, there's 34 employees. So the other thing we have to look at is the base pay adjustments, but also the compression, meaning that if you have someone that's been here 4 years that's over 12 an hour, they should not be compensated the same as someone who perhaps has only been here 1 or 1.5 years. So to maintain our existing pay relationships, we have some non-full-time employees with salaries above 11 or 12, and there's also full-time employees who would be adjusted. In the example below that's cut off a little bit, we have part-time circulations assistants that will be moving up to the 11 per hour, or have moved up to 11 per hour. We have full-time circulation assistants that may then well be within a few dollars of that individual, but have been here 3 or 4 years. So we'll need to look at that compression piece. So we have 2 phases. Our goal, we've completed phase 1. We met the $11 an hour on January the 1st. And then we are hoping on February to move that to 12 an hour about a month later from the 1st. And then we'll meet the requirements of the minimum wage for next January. Each of these phases, again, have compensation adjustments to avoid compression. The cost for fiscal year 22 for the two options is $113,000, and that does include our benefit changes. So phase one that we've discussed, we're looking for our folks who are between $11.15 and $15.99 to have a 2.5% wage increase, and our cutoff is 16 per hour. No adjustments occur to staff over 16 per hour. Phase two, we're moving to 12%, and then there's an additional adjustment for those employees who are between $12 and $15.99.
Well, so $12, oh,
I'm sorry?
you indicated 12%, but did you mean $12?
$12, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
So this is what the cost summary looks like for fiscal year 22. We're estimating $113,070, and that shows you the benefit breakout for the compression adjustments for full-time staff. And then the annualized estimated cost going forward shows $246,341. And one of the reasons we're looking at 12 an hour is a recent survey we've completed shows on average retail positions in our area start between $12 and $14 an hour. And the City of Newport News in December raised their minimum start to 12 an hour as well. So we feel we'll be in a much better competitive position to move towards 12 now. So do I have any questions?
Yes, sir. One question. When you're looking at these figures, a certain part of it is the money it takes to move folks up to the 12, and then the other part is to address the compression issue. What percentage of those totals is compression? Half of it, or?
I don't have an exact figure, but the total is closer to a 40 or a 60-40 split.
Okay.
So the actual adjustments themselves are about 60% of the cost. 40% is for the compression.
Okay, all right, that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
Would those two numbers be added together of the total cost?
Yes.
Okay.
So the total cost reflects both the 2.5% adjustment for compression for anyone under 16 an hour, plus the raising wages for our folks who are under 12 an hour.
Okay, and I understand where you're coming from as far as the 12 an hour, but what will that do to us the following year when somebody's been with us, say they start in mid-February of this year, and then next year minimum wages bump to 12, and we hire somebody at 12, and I've been working here for 8 months? You know, we might have that same thing we're looking at now.
Yeah, and that's one of the pieces we're working into the 23-24 budget. Is our goal is to adjust the minimum starting wage as well as a regular salary adjustment that would move folks forward through that process.
Okay, because I could see it coming next year, the same thing we're trying to take care of this year. Thank you. Thank you.
So had you worked this into this year's budget then?
No, we had not.
So where are we getting the funds for the adjustment?
That piece I am not 100% clear on.
Okay.
And Ms. Larson, we do have enough going on within this year's budget from general fund savings, from some of the other money that's freed up some, that I have no concern with funding it. The issue with the $12 and doing it early, we didn't have to do it this year. I do believe it's important for us to do it this year. And as we all look around and look at help wanted signs, many fast food industry is $15 an hour. So we're competing with somebody that's indoor in a controlled environment versus our staff that is often outdoors. Nice days are nice, but not so nice days, they're still outdoors.
Right.
The $12 an hour helps, but it's not the end. And so my hope was that we could accelerate and do it a little quicker. I know I spoke with Patrick mentioned Newport News going to 15. I've heard others going to 15 within the peninsula area. So we're going to continue to be fairly far behind in terms of our minimum pay. It's a real challenge for local governments as well as private sector right now in terms of pay equity. And so the $12 was trying to do it a year in advance. We do have money within our budget that would cover that, but it was not specifically budgeted for that intent.
I suspect some of that money that we have available to address this question this year is due to our inability to fill some positions that mean that we're not spending some of that salary at this point.
And I would say, our finance director, Ms. Day, is coming up behind Mr. Teague, and so I've probably spent the general fund savings 3 or 4 or 5 times in her opinion, but I feel confident that we can find a way to fund that going forward this year.
And Mr. Stevens, to your point, we've had multiple discussions about the need to be able to hire people. We have shortages all across the board with some of our staff. So I think it's important that we recognize that. And hopefully the citizens understand it's very important, especially as they call and have issues about some of the staffing in some of our departments, that this is an ongoing issue. And that's something that we're taking a hard look at to be able to address this. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's certainly the case that it's not just us that are experiencing this kind of difficulty. Yesterday, Mr. Stevens and I attended the mayors and chairs for the peninsula, and this is an across-the-board situation locally, and I think we've seen evidence that it is a national problem.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There are some areas in the Commonwealth that my day job, we have no issue with getting staff. And of course, we've bumped it up considerably as well, which, some jobs you need to take a real look at. They've been paid way too low for a very long time. But other areas, it's very, very hard to fill positions. And so you're right, it's an ongoing issue everywhere. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teague.
Thank you.
Okay. So our third item is a pre-budget catch-up on our revenues and expenditures. Ms. Day.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. This afternoon, I'll provide an update on the county's finances, as well as touch on a few matters regarding the upcoming budgets for fiscal year 23 and 24. I do have included as part of tonight's presentation an overview of the department's budgets, and I'll address the minimum wage comment at that time. So some of our topics this afternoon will include an update on the fiscal year 2021, our most recently completed fiscal year. We'll also touch on the first 6 months of this fiscal year and how we're faring so far. I'll do a COVID-19 update in terms of finances, and also we'll touch on some highlights for the upcoming 2-year budget for 23 and 24. So at the October 26th meeting this year, I provided a detailed update on last year, fiscal year 2021, and that was based on preliminary figures at that time. We were pretty far along with our annual financial audit at that point, and so the final figures really did not change significantly from what I've previously reported. As a quick recap, overall, the actual revenue came in at about $218 million. Our expenditures and outstanding encumbrances or purchase orders was about $192 million. That resulted in a year-end surplus of $26 million. To highlight the components of that, about $1.8 million resulted from lower health and dental claims. So that was a good trend to see. Also included in that $26 million was about $8.1 million that came back to the county from the school division. That was their year-end surplus from last year. That number you've seen before, that was earmarked for certain items in this year's budget, as well as funding needs for the school division in future budgets. Also, as part of our 22 budget, we had set aside some of our fund balance that we anticipated having for capital needs and debt service needs, and that made up about $5.6 million. And then the balance went to our unassigned fund balance, excuse me, and that was about $11 million. As a reminder of that $11 million that went into the unassigned fund balance, this year, over the summer months, we did allocate $7 million of that for a property acquisition, which was those courthouse properties. So that's a good segue for a general discussion about fund balance. As you know, our fiscal policies do require that we maintain an unassigned fund balance that equals or exceeds 12% of our general governmental expenditures. That's broader than just the general fund. That would include the other funds that we talk about, where we have our other programs, housing, social services, some of our ongoing capital needs. So on average, that totals about $250 million a year. At the end of fiscal year 2021, that requirement would equate to about $30 million. Our balance was $56 million, so we have a very healthy unassigned fund balance. Since the pandemic started, we have used some of our fund balance for expenditures that were cut from the budget due to the uncertainty of the pandemic, but still deemed important for one-time uses, such as, again, the property acquisition that I mentioned earlier, and to restore some equipment replacements and items of that nature. So we've definitely dipped into our fund balance more in recent times than we have in historic times, but we've been very strategic about that. We made sure we were using it for good purposes, and we also made sure that we were staying well above that requirement of $30 million. So the next two slides, this one included, is from our financial advisor, Davenport. And I'm not going to read every bullet, but basically the takeaways are that our fund balance provides cash flow to us to help us get through not only tough economic times when the revenues are down, but also during those months where our cash balances may be a little lower. As you know, we collect our property taxes, which is about 2/3 of our budget, twice a year. So there's certain months where our cash is high and certain months where our cash gets low. But our needs may be high. For example, we may have significant capital projects going on, but the cash itself could be low because it's been a while since we've collected taxes. So we have to maintain a healthy cash reserve for that purpose. It also helps us minimize how much we borrow, not just pay-go projects, but when we borrow. We have significant projects in our CIP every year. We try to avoid going to market and borrowing money every year because it costs money to borrow money. There are costs that we have to pay our financial advisors and the various rating agencies and folks that we work with, and then also just your ongoing interests. We try to really wait until we have several significant projects that make sense to borrow for, and then we may borrow every 2 to 3 years. We also have major storms in our area, so our cash needs can get very high at a time where our actual cash normally would be low because it's been several months again since we collected taxes. We do receive some federal and state reimbursements for some of our storm-related costs. It does not cover everything. It's typically 60 to 75%, and it can take 6 months to a year to get those reimbursements. So again, that fund balance is there for those purposes. Another point is to avoid using fund balance for operational needs because it inherently creates a budgetary imbalance. How are we going to continue to pay that expenditure going forward? The example that came up today was minimum wage. We would not want to use our fund balance to pay for that because we know that's ongoing. We also always want to make sure that we have a detailed plan to replenish our fund balance when we do use it. Generally, when we use fund balance, it's really after we've determined that we don't have sufficient savings in this year's budget to fund a significant need, such as a property acquisition. We're also, while we're making that decision, we're looking at the current year and we're doing a projection on where we think we're going to end the year so we can determine how quickly we can replenish what we're using. You also heard earlier this afternoon several grants that we've been awarded. That's just tonight. That was $500,000 of grants, 10 grants across 6 departments. You see that on a fairly regular basis. We're looking for those funding opportunities, and that also helps us bridge some of our operational needs so that we can utilize other people's money beside our own. So moving on to this year, fiscal year 22, presented here is the full year's budget and then 6 months of activity. So this is covering the July timeframe through December. And overall, we're faring much better than we were this time during the height of the pandemic. I mentioned earlier that general property taxes is the county's largest revenue source. That includes our real estate and our personal property taxes. But in comparing this year's actuals to last year's, you'll see the big differences are really in the other local taxes, the state and federal, and then the uses of fund balance. I'll talk about the other local taxes in a little bit more detail on the next slide. The decrease in the state and federal revenue of about $5 million, that again has to do with the sales tax for education. It used to come to the county as revenue, and then we paid it to the schools as an expense. And now it goes directly to the school division. It doesn't funnel through us at all. For fund balance, I've talked a lot about fund balance up to this point, but again, this is really utilizing our prior year surpluses for more one-time needs. Last year, in fiscal year 21, we used it to fund some purchase orders. We did have some supply chain issues, so we had to buy some things in advance that was not received before the end of the year. We funded some capital needs. We funded some budget restorations. If you remember, in 21, we had reduced our overall budget by 10%. There were some things that were critical within those reductions that we were able to restore. And we were able to provide a 2% raise to staff as well. This year, in fiscal year 22, we're using fund balance to fund $5.8 million of planned projects in the CIP. We acquired property for $7 million. Again, that's the courthouse property. We've allocated $2.8 million back to the school division for the design of a new preschool. And we again had some outstanding purchase orders from last year of about $1.5 million. Next slide, please, Mr. Purse. Thank you. So to narrow our focus on the harder hit areas during the pandemic, this is a snapshot of how our major tourism-driven revenues are tracking. Given their rearage, again, in the collection of these taxes, sales tax, 2 months lag in collection, and our meals and lodging has a 1 month lag. So we're really looking at about 4 to 5 months worth of activity as opposed to a full 6 months. You can see the vast improvement over last year. Again, these months are typically the heavy tourism months for us, and the pandemic really did hit us hard last year. Not on this slide, but worth mentioning, is how are we doing on these taxes compared to pre-pandemic times? And so that would have been fiscal year 2019. I didn't put the numbers on the slide because it got hard to see, but basically for sales tax, when we compare ourselves how we're trending this year to 2019, we are up about 30%, and that is month after month. We were averaging before the pandemic about $900,000 a month of sales tax. We are now trending about $1.2 million. And so that's about a 30% increase. Most likely, most of that is due to the taxation on internet sales. For lodging tax, we're up about 13%, and that's 13% over the actual numbers before the pandemic. So that's a very good trend. Meals taxes are up about 8%. One of the challenges with projections, however, is that we're in highly volatile times. So obviously we have the Omicron variant here now that is impacting our local economy, and we've had some recent inclement weather. So as I talk to you this afternoon, I suspect when we receive December's revenue and January's revenue, we may see a downward trend again. Not shown in the figures above is the new cigarette tax. It was a new tax in fiscal year 2022, so there is no prior year data to show you. However, it's worth noting that the budgeted amount was about $900,000, and through December we've collected almost $350,000. But that's really only 3 months worth of collections because that effective date was in September. So if we trend that out annually and it continues at that level, we will come in above budget. And just as a reminder, that specific revenue source was earmarked for CIP for this year. Switching gears to the spending side of the budget and noting that assuming all expenses did come in evenly, we would expect to have spent about half or about 50% of our budget since we're 6 months in. As you can see, overall, we're at 52%, but that last category, contributions to outside entities and transfers, is really skewing that at 72%, and I'll touch on that next. So this line graph shows how each department is faring compared to budget. The green line is the 50% benchmark. The red line is where everybody stands. Most of the departments that are under that, where you're seeing the 46, 43%, that is primarily due to turnover. The question came up earlier again about the minimum wage not being budgeted this year or next. We do expect that to cost somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000. We have about $2 million in personnel savings to date. And that is just across the board. We are seeing it in every department where we had turnover and vacancies. We've also had some early retirements. For those areas tracking above 50%, I mentioned earlier that that assumes all of our expenses come in evenly. The reality is that's not always the case. For example, in financial admin, that's where we pay the county's annual insurance premiums. It's also where we pay the county's annual audit. The insurance premiums are due in July in full every year, and the audit is occurring in the fall. So that full year's worth of budget has already been spent. For IT, very similar scenario. Most of their equipment maintenance contracts and their software contracts are due at the beginning of the year. That's the majority of their budget, so a lot of that's already been paid, so they tend to skew high compared to budget for most of the year. And then the other category, that's the one that was at 72%, that was really throwing off that overall percentage. That's the area that we fund our outside agencies, a lot of the nonprofits that we fund. We typically provide them their full budgeted amount in July. We also transfer money to other funds. So the general fund's contribution to social services, housing, capital programs, all of that money gets transferred at the beginning of the year. So again, it's going to skew higher than 50%. These are the three areas that I talk about each time I do the presentation, and it's all for the same reasons. So real quickly, in terms of the COVID-19 funding, as a reminder, I did want to mention that the financial information that I present does not include COVID funding. Those funding sources, again, have been set aside in separate funds. We have a fund for CARES, and we now have a separate fund for ARPA. And we do that so that those funding dollars don't get commingled or distort just our ongoing operational outlook. COVID funds, of course, are one-time funds that are really meant to help with the pandemic, and they're not an ongoing revenue source for the county. Our largest COVID-related allocations to date have been CARES and ARPA. The CARES funding has been fully utilized. The federal deadline was December 31st, 2021, and we met that deadline and fully utilized every dollar. Our ARPA funding uses were approved by you earlier this year. We're working to ramp up the personnel to get a lot of those programs off the ground. We're also working on various procurements to jumpstart some of those capital projects. We are continuing to watch inflation and also the supply chain and make modifications as we need to. I also wanted to mention, in terms of ARPA, the Treasury Department just recently released its final rule, and that's its guidance to us on how to utilize those funds. So we're working our way through that guidance now with some of our agencies such as NACO and VACo to ensure that we have all the proper procedures in place. So these have been some severe economic ups and downs. We've seen recovery in certain revenue items such as tourism, but again, when new variants emerge, we tend to see that reverse course. So we're experiencing a lot of the things that everyone else is experiencing: supply chain, personnel issues, turnover, and significant increases in the cost of construction. So to touch on the upcoming budget, of course, 23-24 is our 2-year budget. The first year is appropriated. The second year is a plan. We are in the midst of our real estate biennial reassessment process. We expect to mail notices by the end of February. In terms of what's been done on the budget at this point, finance has been working with human resources on the personnel needs for the next 2 years. The CIP requests have been submitted, reviewed, and sent to the Planning Commission to begin their work in terms of compliance with the comprehensive plan. The departments have submitted their operational requests to finance, and we're currently going through our evaluation of those requests. We've received our outside agency funding requests, and we've begun our analysis of those. And we're also working on our revenue projections for the next 2 years. There is great uncertainty, of course, with the state's budget. We have the governor's budget that we've been working with, but obviously there's been some changes at the state level that will likely impact that budget. And then in closing, there are a few dates that I thought were worth mentioning. We obviously had our pre-budget public hearing back on January 11th. Here with you this afternoon, providing a financial update. Over the next several weeks, we'll be working on all the information that I've discussed in terms of what's been submitted from the departments, and working on our projections and working to balance the budget. March 28th, the county administrator should be releasing his proposed budget. On April 5th, we have a community meeting, likely to be virtual, that we will have. April 12th will be our public hearing on the tax rates and the budget. We have another meeting planned on April 26th to dive into more details into the budget, and we are scheduled to adopt our budget on May the 17th. And with that, that concludes my remarks. Happy to respond to any questions, comments you may have.
Thank you very much for that very detailed and positive report. Do we have questions from board members?
Question. And I always bring it up. I know that our, 12% in the fund balance is really a good high number. And Davenport has said, multiple times that we're in great shape with that 12%. I just would love to see us, if we could, push it to 14. And, even if we dip down to 10, that gives us a lot of room to be able to maneuver and buy certain things that may come up. And I know it's a push because we're going to take it from somewhere in order to add it there. But if we can just see if there's anything we can, and I know Davenport's always telling us 12 is a good number. Most of them don't get to 12, so you're in great shape at 12. But that 14 would just be a nice number to get to if we could possibly do it over the years. Thanks.
I just want to say thank you. I always appreciate these updates, and I think they're so important to the citizens as well. I do want to speak a little bit. I had our Tourism Council meeting last week, and you are right about January for sure. We've seen with the new variant plus the weather, but Busch Gardens is opening now year-round. And even last weekend in the snow, at least some local residents that I know went out, ate there. That does help us as well with meals tax. And some of the hoteliers did report that they are actually seeing some school group business on the books, which we have not had since we've had COVID. The tourism market right now has been strictly leisure. So we've had nothing really internationally, business or school group, which is a large component. And in Jamestown, Yorktown, also, Jamestown said that they have several school groups that are scheduled to come out as well. So we'll hold our fingers crossed and hope that continues. And I was wondering if you could touch on just a little bit any conversations that you've had with the schools as they are talking about their budget. I did see something briefly in the newspaper that they would very much like to do a heavy compensation push to their staff. And so I don't know if you've heard if you've heard anything from your counterpart there or not.
Most of what we've discussed has been very similar, related to compensation and also capital needs.
Okay.
I do know that they're pursuing some pretty significant grants that are a result of the COVID funding. And to the extent they're successful, that could lower our contribution for capital going forward. In terms of the operating budget, though, it does sound like it's more the compensation area that they're looking at. She has also shared with, my counterpart has shared with me that they have some significant increases in their health insurance premiums. And I know they're utilizing the help of a consultant to pursue other programs as well to see if there's some cost savings there.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sadler, do you have anything?
No, actually, Ms. Larson asked a question I was going to ask, so I'm well covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eisenhower?
No, the only thing I would say is I've heard that they're talking about substantial raises for teachers, which are sorely needed. And I think the biggest concern right now is that, given the rate of inflation and the about 5% or so increase in medical that's being passed along, that the net result is you might get a 10% raise and have effectively zero. So it's a concern. I don't know how you skin that cat, but I think that's something we'll have to wrestle with in this upcoming budget.
So can I ask a little bit about the sales tax, local sales tax in particular, because that is an area where we had a structural change, right, where we used to pass that money through, and it appeared in our budget, but now it's going directly to the schools. We showed a pretty significant drop in the amount of money that we would be getting, but a good portion of that was going on to the schools. Do you have a sense of the money that we received from the sales tax that we kept, how much of an increase we probably saw this year?
So we have two revenue sources for sales tax. The local sales tax is the 1% that comes to the county that we maintain. We previously received 1 1/8% sales tax that was strictly 100% education. That was about $12 to $13 million a year. That entire amount now goes to the school division. So they get theirs directly, we get ours, and we keep it.
Okay.
So they are experiencing similar increases. Theirs is more statewide as opposed to ours being more local. But my understanding is they're experiencing the same type of increase in the 20 to 30% range.
So I guess what I'm wondering about is if we looked at that slide where you had the significant drop in funding in that area, what that would look like if we had already applied that direction of the sales tax money for education to the schools previously, whether it would be a plus or a minus.
It would have been more flat.
Flat.
It would have been flat. It was the majority of that number. The only thing that is left, we really receive very little federal funding. I think we receive about $8,000 for payment in lieu of taxes. The rest of that category is constitutional officers and money that we receive from the compensation board. That's been pretty flat. We haven't received a significant increase. They budgeted a 3% increase for raises. However, because of turnover, we haven't received the full allotment. When we have turnover, we have expenditure savings, but we also don't receive the reimbursement from the state.
I think I'm not being very clear. I wonder if we could go back to that slide for a second.
Yes. One more. Yep, that 4.9 million.
Yes, right. Right. So when we look at the amount here, am I doing this right? The other local taxes, right?
State and federal is where that the education.
Oh, right.
Piece.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. State and federal, and so there we saw the $4.9 million reduction compared to last year. What do we think? Do we think we're going to come close to what our budget number was in that category?
The 15.6 million for this year, yes. Right. Yes, to date we've received 7.4 million, right. And that's really only 5 months because of that delay in sales tax. So if we annualize that, we should meet or exceed our 15.6. I believe my revenue projection showed about a $2 million increase in our sales tax.
But Ms. Day, that budget number, had we had the schools in this year's budget, that 15 million would be more like 27 million,
27,
correct?
28 million,
So,
yes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to disentangle this to get a sense of what the actual impact on our budget is going to be now that we have decided to directly let that money flow to the schools.
And it really balances. This is the revenue side. On the next 2 slides over where I show the department, it's the line graph. Stop there. I'm sorry. Go back one if you don't mind, please. So there's a line there for the school division. You see that 100 million? That used to be 113 million.
Right.
So we took away the revenue, but we also took away the expenditure. So the impact on our budget is really a net zero.
And Ms. Day, if we're experiencing greater sales tax returns, the school division would be experiencing greater sales tax return. When you get to the end of the year, the money that's unspent is our money that returns to us.
That's correct.
So by giving it to them directly, we didn't take anything away from what is their year-end surplus that would return to the county. That number still should be the same.
It was really a shell game.
Right, right. But it does appear to be the case that the schools will therefore have that significant increase that will be provided through that direct funding to them, so that from what I read in the news, it seemed as if they were talking about a somewhat smaller overall increase in funding that they were looking for from localities than we might have seen in previous years when this would have been included. I don't know if you've seen those stories as well.
I haven't seen, a preliminary number yet.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that report. I think that's a lot of positive news and interesting ideas to be pursuing. Mr. Heppel's suggestion about the fund balance, of course, is interesting for us to think about. We obviously also know that we have a lot of one-time money that we will be dealing with that may help us to address some of our future needs by taking them off the table now. Yeah, great. Okay. We'll now move on to the annual report. Ms. Rouse, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. All right, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for allowing me to present an overview of James City County's fiscal year 2021 annual report. The annual report highlights the accomplishments of county departments during fiscal year 2021, which is the period from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. For this presentation, I will cover a few highlights from each department. I do want to make one note about the document's format. You may recall that in our previous annual report document, we had highlights from each department's accomplishments, followed by additional bullet points highlighting each department's COVID-19 response. So now, as our pandemic response has become a protracted event, our operational adjustments for COVID-19 were actually included in a section in the beginning of the document, and then you'll see throughout the department's accomplishments, there are operational items that are related to COVID-19, as that's sort of become a part of our day-to-day practices. So the full annual report document is available on our website, jamescitycountyva.gov. I'll begin with a brief summary of our COVID-19 response. The Greater Williamsburg Vaccination Clinic was a partnership with the City of Williamsburg, York County, the Virginia Department of Health, Colonial Williamsburg, William & Mary, and other community partners. It opened on January 22nd, 2021, and over the course of nearly 4 months, the clinic administered 22,840 doses of the Moderna vaccine to local residents and workers. County departments expanded remote provision of some services. For instance, the Building Safety and Permits Division began offering remote inspections, and Parks and Recreation offered at-home versions of some of their special events. Social Services Housing Unit provided more than $1.4 million in assistance for pandemic-related needs, including emergency shelter and rental assistance. The Solid Waste Division saw nearly 25% more users at the 3 convenience centers compared to the previous fiscal year. In county administration, a second assistant county administrator position was created with approval from you all, the Board of Supervisors. We established a diversity, equity, and inclusion team, and the communications division launched from the helm a redesigned version of our employee newsletter. Community Development completed the second year of Engage 2045, the comprehensive plan update process. Substantial progress occurred for several important transportation improvement projects, and Community Development also completed new and amended conservation easements on Meadows Farm to protect scenic views along Forge Road. The Office of Economic Development worked with the Economic Development Authority to issue a contract for approximately 58 acres in the James River Commerce Center. The county welcomed 6 new businesses and assisted more than 125 existing small businesses with securing all available pandemic relief funding through the Virginia 30-Day Fund. Economic Development received a Community Economic Development Award from the Virginia Economic Developers Association for its role. After 2 years of preparation, Financial and Management Services, in partnership with the Information and Resources Management Department, launched a new financial software system called Munis. FMS managed over $30 million in federal funding from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, and American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funding. Those are acronyms for a reason. That's a mouthful. Finally, FMS instituted stricter internal controls to help monitor the impacts of COVID-19 on revenues and expenditures, and later worked with departments to restore operational budget needs. The county closed out FY 2021 with a healthy reserve that saved taxpayers $1.6 million in debt service payments through a bond refunding. The county's AAA credit rating was reaffirmed during that process. Our fire department took the lead on behalf of James City County and played a critical role in coordinating the Greater Williamsburg Vaccination Clinic. Fire utilized CARES Act funding to upgrade the Emergency Communications Center consoles to enhance social distancing and improve technology. The department also improved its response capability by staffing an additional engine company at Fire Station 3 and increasing minimum daily staffing at Fire Stations 1 and 5. For general services, following the implementation of extensive floodplain management activities, the county has been elevated from a Class 7 rating to a Class 5 rating in the National Flood Insurance Program's community rating system, making James City County the first community in Virginia to receive a Class 5 rating. As a result, county homeowners with flood insurance policies are eligible for a discount of up to 25% on flood insurance premiums for NFIP policies issued or renewed in special flood hazard areas. General Services Fleet and Equipment Division continues to incorporate alternative fuel equipment into the county's fleet, and the department also commissioned a space needs study to inventory existing county facilities and project future needs. Human Resources changed to a virtual format for its benefit open enrollment and new employee orientation. HR celebrated the graduation of the inaugural class of the Emerging Leaders Academy, a professional development program that was conducted in partnership with Virginia Tech and York County. HR also developed and implemented the county's COVID-19 preparedness response plan. Information Resources Management worked with the Department of Financial and Management Services to replace the county's 25-year-old financial system. They worked with Cox Communications to help offer extended broadband services to students using CARES Act funding, and they provided telework solutions for employees to work remotely. Parks and Recreation partnered with more than 40 community organizations to offer more equitable access to recreation services, including a day support program for young adults with disabilities and services that provide free summer camp, transportation, and lunches for youth with financial need. The Chickahominy Riverfront Park Shoreline Stabilization Project mitigated the eroding of steep banks along the Chickahominy River and Gordon Creek through the establishment of living shorelines. Finally, Parks and Recreation launched a new registration program called Perfect Mind. The Police Department was the recipient of the Board of Supervisors 2020 Chairman's Award in recognition of its professionalism and positive community relations. The department developed an election date operational plan based on Federal Emergency Management Agency's Incident Command System. The plan was nationally recognized and shared as a model for best practices. The 2020 Police Chiefs Award was given to members of the Police Department and Colonial Community Corrections for their outstanding service during the COVID-19 pandemic. In social services, the benefit program's eligibility phone line received over 12,000 calls from citizens inquiring about medical and financial assistance. Participation and benefit programs increased significantly. The highest growth occurred in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, which experienced an 18% increase, and the Medicaid program, in which over 10,000 citizens were found eligible for medical assistance. This represents a 17% increase over the previous fiscal year. Permanency was also achieved for 10 children in the foster care program. Last but not least, after a delay due to the pandemic, the Williamsburg Regional Library was excited to open the new Kiwanis Kids Idea Studio at the James City County Library. The library's ongoing partnership with William and Mary resulted in a successful One Book, One Community reading event. Finally, the library debuted a state-of-the-art bookmobile to bring library collections, services, and programs to every corner of the community. This concludes our FY 2021 annual report. Thank you for your time, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that impressive report on the accomplishments of the past year. Anybody have any questions?
Have any questions? Just thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have one more presentation under board discussions, and that is an update on the Natural and Cultural Assets Plan effort. Tammy Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Over the past several months, staff, the Natural and Cultural Assets Mapping Committee, and the Technical Advisory Committee have worked with our consultant on the first steps of developing the Natural and Cultural Assets Plan. Ms. Karen Firehawk, Executive Director of GIC, will make a brief presentation to the board on progress to date and next steps. We look forward to any questions from the board and input to incorporate into the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rosario, and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here today. If you need me to remove my mask to hear me better, please let me know.
Thank you.
Are you okay?
Appreciate it.
All right. I'll try not to mumble. Okay, so with that, I'm going to give you a brief overview of where we're at and then show you some maps. I do recognize that some of the maps will be a little hard to see because they're actually designed to be printed out at 6 feet large. So you will have an opportunity to see those maps as PDFs on your own screens when we get them ready for the public. So with that, apology. So I'm just going to do a quick reminder of the project origin for any members of the public who are not familiar with the project, talk about the progress to date, show you some of the draft maps, and then talk about next steps for expanded engagement of your community. So just a reminder, the impetus for the project came out of your 2035 strategic plan and affirmed community priorities established during your recent update. So the goals and objectives that are driving this effort are coming directly from the work you just did. We're not inventing new goals or new missions. We're taking very much from the community work that's already been done. In your strategy and action environment 3.1, you specifically talked about implementing the plan that I'm going to talk about today. So really quickly, just again for the public, what are natural assets and why do we need to evaluate them? Well, as we have explained in the past, nature is also part of our asset portfolio, and it's interesting you just had a presentation about your budget. So we also like to think about how we value our landscape and catalog that and understand where the most valuable places are so that we can add them to our resource inventory, know their worth, and then decide how to deal with them. And there's lots of benefits to conserving this. Of course, wildlife habitat is a chief benefit, but also conserving working lands such as farms and forests that contribute to the economy. Protecting and preserving water quality and supply. You have a lot of your water coming from groundwater, but even just protecting that surface is important. And then cost-effective stormwater management and hazard mitigation. Storms are going to keep happening, but if we preserve some of those areas that are subject to storms, that will also save us funds in the long run. And then public health, quality of life, and recreation networks. Being able to get outside, which has been extremely important, especially during the pandemic. And then I just like to point out this barred owl. We met this gentle man or woman on a trip through one of your parks. There was a number of barred owls calling. It was a really lovely afternoon. So these assets that are on part of the landscape also support culture. So you think about the settings for plantations, you think about battlefields, Civil War, Revolutionary War, as well as just recreation areas. So that landscape setting is really important to these historic and cultural pieces. So there's a lot of applications for this work, such as when you're working on your long-range transportation plan, next time you update your strategic plan for the county, agricultural and forestal districts, and many other efforts. So what we have done so far since I last presented to you in our beginning is to actually start to create some of the maps. Now they are draft now, but what we're doing is we're grabbing the most high quality intact pieces of the landscape that we have modeled using land cover. And we were very fortunate to be able to just get a recent update of the land cover from the government. So we actually have updated the data to 2020. And then also we're able to get LIDAR, which is basically satellite imagery beamed to earth that tells us how tall things are, so we can tell the difference between a wetland and a forest. So we're actually able to obtain that. So we've got some of the best data for your county. And we're looking at those large chunks of landscape, but also how they connect through corridors so that we can move across the landscape. The more connection there is, just think of it like a circuit or a spider's web, the more connection there is, the more resilient your landscape is. So there's a 6-step process that we've been going through. Step 1, we've completed in the sense that we're, like I said, utilizing the goals from the effort you already just went through. The next step is to review data. So as I said, we've been able to obtain and create some new data for the county. So this land cover information that we've created can be used in many other processes that you'll be doing. And then now this is where we're at. We're actually in the middle of the map making. So there's a lot of work to gather data, but some of that data comes from the community. So I'll talk about that in a moment when we look at some of the maps. And then what's at risk? What might change? So that's just to understand how you'll grow and develop. And so where are areas where action may be needed? And action could be as simple as a landowner taking action on their own landscape for a conservation plan, or it could be somehow when you're looking at your future zoning, you might make a decision based on this information. And then ranking. So what should we actually do? I call this the so what number of the effort. Making maps is fun. I quite enjoy it, but maps are only a tool. Data is a tool. We want to understand how this informs how you manage your county. And then implementation. So we'll be creating a strategic plan that goes with this, and people have been asking me, what's going to be in this plan? And my answer is, I don't know yet, because we're still evaluating what we have before we can make a plan on what to do. So if you'll be patient, we will get to that phase. So this is our sort of flow chart of where we're at. And it's hard to look at graphs. You've been looking at a lot of charts this afternoon. So just to highlight that we're here in January. We've just had our steering committee meeting a couple weeks ago, and that was our second one. So I'm using steering committee for short. It's the Natural and Cultural Assets Mapping Committee, NACAMAC. But they just gave us a lot of great input that we're currently actually putting into the maps to update them. And we will also be continuing to work with our county committee. So we have a committee of county staff that's also giving us advice. And then we check in every 2 weeks to make sure that we're on track. We will also, and I'm going to be talking about this in a moment, but we will be now moving into creating a community survey so that people can actually, anyone in the community can go online, look at the maps, and drop a point that's a place that's important to them. Similar to what you did with your comprehensive plan, but they'll be able to say, this is a special place to me, and they'll be able to tell us why. This is a special place because it has a beautiful view and it's important to me. We've had all kinds of different type of input and projects we've done in Virginia in the past, like this is a favorite place to get engaged. That was my favorite one. This is a place we like to watch rockets launch. So you never know what's important to the community until you ask. So we're going to be getting all of those fun comments and then sorting them out into making sense of all that. Okay. So we have had to update the land cover information with new data that we were able to get. This is from aerial imagery that's flown and then we interpret it. So of course some areas have been developed, so we've taken them off the map. And then we've also gone in the field and investigated for ourselves, because sometimes you can't tell something from a satellite. You have to get boots on the ground. So we've been poking around, looking at different landscapes and trying to understand what it's like on the ground. So this is the first map. And I put these sort of garish neon colors to make it a little easier to see. But those are the largest chunks of intact landscape of high quality in James City County. And if you're trying to think about how you might compare to other localities, you have a lot. So that's good news. You're doing very well in terms of having landscapes that are really important. And we're now going through the process of ranking these because some areas may be more significant than others. An example of that would be if an area has a lot of cultural resources, so it's, it's a natural landscape, but it's also got archaeological resources or rare species, we might bump that rank up for that property. So right now, we're just kind of looking at all of these things you see in neon green are very high quality, and then we're going to do an additional analysis once we finish getting public input. We also do these themed overlay maps because we can't put everything on one map, or frankly, it can make it look like spaghetti. So what we do is to try to tease out the different themes that we want to look at. So another map to look at is agriculture. And this is going to be showing you open spaces that have high quality agricultural soils. These data come from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and so they're the best soils for growing crops. So if you look at the sort of bright orange colors, those are the highest quality soils in the county. And that can be helpful to us as we look at, say, ag-forestal districts. Where might you want to work on expanding the size of a district to help protect some of those soils? Soils are one of those things that, they're place dependent, and conserving them is really important. Oh, I wanted to also add, we're going to be adding sort of what I'll call cultural agricultural aspects to this as well, such as pick your own farms. So you have a number of places where you can pick berries and fruit, and farm stands. So we'll be adding all that sort of cultural agricultural features to this map. So it can become a tool for agritourism. So we've been working with the committee to get great ideas for what to add to this map. And then forestry. Forestry is also an important part of your rural economy. And so what we're looking at is areas that are at least 30 acres in size that are thickly forested. And that's the reason we picked the 30 acres is because that's something that you could maintain over time, not just one and done. So not just you're going to cut it and move on and develop it, but somebody could maintain that in forestry for extended time. So as you think about your economics, thinking about the viability of forestry in the county, we're not saying that forestry is happening on all these parcels. We're just saying that they are large enough for that to occur. We also included ag-forestal districts on that map. And then water. It's a very water-rich county, as you know, and it's got a lot of marshes to it. So this is showing all the streams, wetlands, reservoirs, and floodplains. And these rivers and streams can also be important connectors for wildlife to move across the county. They're also part of your natural beauty, and of course, help us with stormwater drainage. So we've mapped all of those, and we'll also be looking at how well forested they are. Just a quick point, I don't have a statistic for you, but just looking at your rivers and streams, they're pretty well forested. So, another piece of good news. And then recreation, now how we get out there and enjoy this landscape. And so of course, we put all of the usual things on the recreation map, such as known trails, parks, but there are also maybe places that are favorite places for hunting or fishing, boating or hiking. Sometimes in communities, they'll tell us this is just a beautiful rural road we really like to walk on. And so it's not on an official trail map, but that community really loves walking or biking or walking the dog on that road. So some places may pop up as significant for recreation that you don't know about, or places people are putting their boats in the water. So we'll be getting all of those assets on the map and then looking at how well the landscape supports them. And this is probably the most fun and most complicated map, heritage and culture, because heritage and culture are defined by the community. So we will, of course, include and have included things that are already identified as community character areas when you just updated the 2035 strategic plan. But then this is the map I expect to get the most comments on when we post it online, people telling us landscapes that are significant to them and why. And then, of course, there are also properties that are historic or structures that are historic that are not in the National Register, right? Because you have to apply to put your property. So you've got a lot of historic places and sites that might not be in a list we would get from the State Department of Historic Resources. So people are telling us about them. For example, one of our committee members, Alan Outlaw, is, as you probably know, you appointed him, a very vocal and knowledgeable local historian. So he's been helping us populate the map and giving us hand maps with sketches. And I give them to our GIS guy, and he tries to find that place and put it on there. So this is going to be the most interesting part, and probably a map that you'll continue to update over time. Because as you know, you're almost constantly hearing about new archaeological sites, new resources, uncovering your history. But how does this help us? It helps us know that, let's say we had a piece of landscape that biologically we rated as highly significant, but it also is supporting archaeological resources. We might bump the rank of that up higher. Or something just people say, this is a beautiful view to us that we really care about it. It's part of the setting of our county. It's an iconic place. So we would also use that to bump up the ranks of those other places. So that's how history and culture play in. And I expect to get quite a lot of input for this. So next steps and expanded public engagement. So in the near term, our GIS team is working now on getting all those comments and sketches and pinpoints into the maps. In February, we proposed to launch the online community survey that we'll have up for probably about 3 weeks. We thought we would launch it on Valentine's Day, just for a little fun, to give us enough time to get all those comments in we have so far from our committee, but also kind of like, what do you love about James City County? Go online and put a pin in it and tell us about it. We will also, in addition to having the online effort that we'll promote with help from county media staff, there will also be 2 stations, one at the rec center and one at the library, with a display and a map, and we'll go a little old school on that, like take this sticky dot from your card and stick it on, it'll be like number 12, and there'll be card number 12, and then you'll write to us what's important and put it in a comment box. Because not everyone sits around going online trying to do surveys. Some people are really sick of surveys, and some people just like a good old-fashioned paper map. So that will be available, and that will be up for the full 3 weeks as well. You guys can also sneak in there and put dots on, I guess, too. But comments that you have in addition to the general public, you can feel free to email us or contact Tammy Rosario and ask that we change a map or edit something. We're happy to do that. So that'll be all through February and into March. And then, like I said, the comment stations, and then the staff of the county will also be doing outreach to your existing county committees. So you've already got established committees for history, and you've got other committees for parks. So they will be we have a little show and tell presentation we're making so they can kind of take this around and get those comments from those different experts that you've already appointed, because there's a lot of knowledge that comes into this process. So we will be taking all of that together and then rerunning the maps. And once we know where those most important places are, then we'll be looking at how they connect. So what corridors connect them? That'll become our sort of base map of the most important natural and cultural sites in the county. So getting to the longer term, like I said, we're refining these maps now. We're going to be launching the online survey on Valentine's Day. We're going to be then taking that information from the public and looking at the importance of the landscape, taking that knowledge that comes from citizens and also any other studies that we come across. Then we'll be moving into the spring to looking at both risks and opportunities. Finally, we'll come back to the community with some strategies. And we'll be also back to the Board of Supervisors. So we want to get more community input. First, we're finding out what we have, then we're going to figure out what to do, okay? And then, so I'm just saying summer, I know that's kind of a vague notion, summer, but part of this depends on how much input we get, how much time it will take us to make all these updates. So with that, actually conclude the presentation. I came here today from Scottsville, Virginia. Some people think we're in Charlottesville. We're in Scottsville. It's a little town on the James River. Try to do our part to keep it clean, to send it clean down to you. But these are the folks on my team. I'm Karen Firehawk. Matt Lee is our forester. Stu Shepard is our GIS analyst. And Lauren Duran is our landscape architect, and her background is in culture and heritage mapping. So kind of a perfect team for the county. So with that, are there questions or comments from the board at this time?
Yes, ma'am. If I could jump in, thank you so much for your presentation. I appreciate it. I did have one question, and thank you for the February 14th date. somebody was asking, I think that's a perfect day to launch it. So good for that. I did have a question about the survey. Since our local committee is so well versed in our community, I'm wondering if they will be able to contribute to the survey questions.
Yes, that's a great question. The survey is literally half drafted sitting on my desktop computer. So as soon as I get back to the office, I'll be finishing that up this week and sending it to Tammy Rosario, who'll give me some insights, I'm sure, and then send it out to them to see. So we've given that's why we're saying the 14th for our launch, because we want to have time to perfect the survey, make sure it makes sense, have the right instructions, and then we're asking the right questions. You know,
So with that, then you're saying that our local committee will be able to provide input with those questions?
Absolutely. We'll pass it through them online, but we'll have to be careful about not having an online meeting. So we'll ask them to respond individually.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions, comments?
Question,
Yes.
and I know we're trying to get if what happens if, say, I own a chunk of land and somebody goes, that's the spot I like, and they start pinning it and several pin it. How do you deal with that with the landowner? I mean, it says this piece of land is significant because of this, this, and this. But I can see that also being a restrictive thing as well without compensation to the landowner of you can't do this and this and this. So I can see it starting out as a plan of these are significant areas for James City County, which I agree we ought to keep as many as possible. But also we have owners that own the property that are going, that's fine if you want this to be a significant part of James City County. How's James City County going to compensate me for this significant part that I own and pay taxes on?
Sure, that's a great question. I really should have brought up private landowners. So to be clear, and especially for any members of the public, if you own a piece of land and you see that it's like neon green, super important, we think it's the best, no one is coming to your property and telling you what to do with your land. But you as the landowner may say, oh, wow, I own this significant piece of the landscape. So as I'm doing my farm plan or let's say I want to develop my land, I might choose that I'm going to keep that part as like my open space in my development. One of the things we did with the committee at our last meeting was we showed them examples of how other counties have used this information and how private developers as well as private citizens use the information. Example of a landowner, a recent interaction I had in another community. She said, wow, I got this big piece of land that I want to put my dream house on, and now you tell me it's really significant and important. She said, well, I'm still going to put my dream house there. And I said, that's great. She said, but you know what, I'm going to actually shift it over here a little bit because you just told me this part of the landscape is really pristine. So she's still building her dream house. She still has that important piece of land, but she's going to manage it how she wishes. And so it's really up to the landowners. I also give examples of a past president of the Home Builders Association had a piece of property that was also showing up on a map. And he said, I'm going to change my development layout. And so he actually redesigned it with smaller lots, put in a park, and got 4 more houses out of the development than his original approval. So he loved it, and he saved a lot of money. So we'll be sure to do a robust engagement, and that's part of, too, on the website, we have a website for this project that's on your server, and we try to address that private concern. But we'll try to make sure we also do that in the survey, because people will have those kind of concerns, like, what does this mean if I'm on this map?
They will, and I'm worried too that they'll think that, okay, I'm on this map. Now I'm going to get people that want to come to my property and look at it. And that's going to be a concern. People that may not understand the whole thing.
We'll try to be very clear in the description that we write for that sort of base map. Right. But what we're doing with the recreation map is we're only including places that are publicly accessible. So sometimes people say, well, this is a favorite fishing hole. We're like, well, yeah, but is that open to the public? Because if we put on a map, somebody sees favorite fishing hole, they're like, oh, we can go fish there. I'm a kayaker, so I'm always like, ooh, can I put my boat in there? So I totally understand that. So we'll be very careful about that public versus private. And this is not, taking people's land and saying it's available for everyone.
Right. I know that's what some people would, probably worry about was, now that my piece, and I love it and I think it's great and all that, but now I got a ton of other people wanting to come over and see what I enjoy and, and that might,
Fortunately, when you actually overlay your park systems and your trails and things, there's plenty of that pristine or great quality land that's available to the public already.
right.
So they can already get out there. And I can just tell you anecdotally, I started our firm 14 years ago. So we've done many, many dozens of plans in Virginia and across the South, and have not yet had a situation where someone thought that something special on a map meant they could go there. So Silicon should knock wood that it's not, this
Keep
won't be
that
the
over to
first.
your house, Mr. Heppel, next week.
Come on over.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll come over to your house.
That's right.
Maybe that will show up as a significant place when he puts his dot on.
Any other questions, comments? Well, this is a very exciting project, and should give us some terrific tools to work with as we update our comprehensive plan in the future, as we consider various proposals, as we think about how to invest county resources in preservation of our environment and the view sheds and the like. So I appreciate very much all the hard work that's going into this, both on your part and on our advisory team, our steering committee, and staff.
And Supervisor McGlennon, can I make one more quick comment?
Sure.
I should have thought of this when you asked the question. We've already had a situation in the county, and I don't mean situation in a negative tone, but where a landowner said, I'm actually developing my property. I heard that there's this plan. I want to know how my development might fit in with this. And so even though we're not done, we're still able to grab the map. They took a look and said, oh, okay, so I think based on this, I'm going to put my buildings over here. So there's already a person who's developing a piece of property who's already wanting to use the information for their plan. So it can actually be seen as a positive tool. And to quote the past president of the Home Builders Association, please just tell me what you want and what you value, and I'll do my best to take care of it. But if I don't know, I can't do that. So I leave you with that thought. And thank you
so much,
Ms.
Ms. Firehawk. Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah. That is the last of our board discussions. We have one board consideration. Would anyone care for a recess for a moment?
Right.
Yeah. Why don't we just take a short recess right now? Session. We now have a board consideration, James City County Parks Master Plan update. Mr. Perkinson.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We are pleased to share with you the Park Master Plan updates for Upper County Park, the James City County Recreation Center Park, and the War Hill Sports Complex. The master plans are long-term planning documents created to provide a conceptual layout to guide the future growth of each park. These plans were prepared in 2021 by an interdepartmental team of county staff from the Departments of Parks and Recreation, General Services, and Community Development. Following the process used in the Shaping Our Shores Master Plan update, the team met on site at each location and held several planning meetings. Each park was reviewed separately, taking into account water restrictions, equitable access, environmental concerns, resource protection areas, zoning, building codes, new trends, and citizen needs. Initial drafts were created in these meetings and presented to the board in April of 2021, and the team solicited input from the public through a month-long survey period, a virtual public meeting, and a Facebook Live presentation in May of June of 2021. We received 174 online and paper surveys regarding the plans. And so the plans were revised based on that input from the public and from the board, and the proposed plans that we brought today have been supported by the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission and the James City County Planning Commission. So these master plans are conceptual. The elements may not be drawn to scale or located in their exact future positions. Following approval, the elements of these plans will be prioritized and included in the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvements Program requests. Before any improvements are made, the special use permits for each park would need to be amended to include the changes. So what I thought I'd do is go through each park map and kind of talk about our existing amenities and what the team is proposing and adding in each master plan. So to start out with, I have Upper County Park. So Upper County is one of our oldest parks. It opened in 1984. There was a draft master plan for the park created in the early 90s, but there's no current approved master plan for the site. So we started with existing park amenities, which there are many. This park is fairly well built out. And we incorporated citizen feedback and data from our 2017 Parks and Rec Master Plan to guide potential future amenities. So the master plan identified a lack of several park amenities in this region of the county, notably hard surface trails, gymnasiums, rec centers, and indoor pools. In the citizen survey, a multi-use trail, splash pad, and off-leash area were the most requested amenities at this park. Currently, this park features a 25-meter outdoor pool, a toddler pool, basketball and sand volleyball courts, picnic shelters, a playground, mountain biking trails, a primitive camping area for youth groups, restrooms, and a seasonal concession. And our team is recommending the following additional amenities. The replacement of the existing toddler pool with a splash pad spray ground feature, a half-mile paved multi-use trail, community gymnasium with 2 full-sized indoor courts and fitness area, pickleball or tennis courts, an off-leash dog area, and an archery range for county programs. And additionally, park maintenance area and increased parking to support those new amenities. The next park we looked at was the James City County Recreation Center Park. So this is essentially all the grounds around the rec center, but it also includes a parcel that was adjacent to the rec center that was a former site of a JCSA water tower. So similar to Upper County Park, there's no existing master plan for this area, but it is largely developed outside of that parcel. There was a conceptual plan for that area from the early 2000s, but no adopted plan. So in our citizen survey, we got a huge response from our skateboarders on the potential expansion of the skate park. We've got a lot of feedback also on the addition of an off-leash area. So currently we have the recreation center, the skate park, 2 lighted softball fields, 2 lighted rectangular fields, a 2.1-mile multi-use paved trail, and an ADA accessible playground. Our team's recommending, in addition to that, the possibility for future expansion of the James City County Recreation Center, expansion of the skate park area, picnic shelter, an off-leash dog area, restrooms to support the picnic shelter, skate park, and off-leash dog area, and a restroom concession building to support the softball fields on the site. And lastly, we looked at the War Hill Sports Complex. So the War Hill Sports Complex Master Plan was last updated in 2016, and since that time, new features such as a private indoor pool facility and community garden have been added to the park. Additionally, some amenities originally featured on the Park Master Plan have been represented at other park locations, such as the potential running center at Jamestown Beach Event Park. Since it is used by so many different groups, before we even started our process, we held a meeting with our 22 community partner organizations to solicit feedback and determine needs for this complex. The feedback we got from them primarily were more lighted rectangular fields, more full-size baseball fields, and softball fields to support the growing participation in senior softball. And then additionally, in our citizen survey, citizens expressed a desire for full-size baseball fields, again, an off-leash dog area, and tennis courts. So we recommended the following additional amenities to this plan. A synthetic turf field complex featuring 2 lighted softball and multi-use fields and 2 lighted large baseball multi-use fields, restrooms and concessions to support that area, a stadium complex featuring a baseball and softball field, redesigned connector road between Long Hill Road and Opportunity Way. And just to give a little more insight on that, we currently have a connector road about where that letter H is that connects from the parking lot and essentially connects Opportunity Way to the entrance to the park on Long Hill Road. Our proposal is to take that road out of the middle of the park and go around our park amenities. The addition of the existing private indoor pool facility, lighted pickleball and tennis courts. We added the existing community garden to the plan and the existing general services grounds maintenance facility, and of course parking to support these new amenities. And then also there were a few items on the 2016 master plan that we proposed to eliminate. One large field from the baseball complex A to enable us to expand parking in that area. 7 of the multipurpose rectangular fields, we kept 4 that are the letter F on this plan, but we had 11 in that area originally. A proposed indoor sports facility, a BMX park, and the running center. So just to reiterate, following the adoption of these plans, the individual amenities that we've mentioned will be prioritized and included in the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvements Program requests. Community input, citizen needs, and available funding will drive the timing of funding for these projects, and before any other improvements are made, the special use permits for each park would need to be amended to include any changes. So I'd love to take any questions, comments.
Thank you, Mr. Perkinson. Anybody have questions for the staff about the master plan?
So thank you very much. First of all, I think Parks and Rec does a great job. I think it's one of the best amenities that we offer here. However, I have some concerns. One being pool. Yes, we have a private pool out at the War Hill track, but what planning is there moving forward for more public pool space for our high schools if we should get into a situation? I know that part of our lease agreement has us, our high schoolers, being able to practice at the facility at War Hill, but for instance, their meets were at Fort Eustis this year. They weren't here because you're coming up against a private organization club trying to get their practice in as well. Plus, it just doesn't, aquatic facilities are very expensive to run. So, they have to look out for their bottom line as well. So, while this may not be part of it, I hope it is part of a master plan in the future, having some plan with that. If it's perhaps when we expand the recreation center, which by the way has a pool that cannot safely be dove into, so we cannot have our high schoolers practicing there. We have waited years for a softball field out at the War Hill track. We're going to do 2. It's better than 0, but I do feel like we do owe the softball players in our community a little bit more than that. But if it's, pickleball is great. We seem to have addressed a lot of pickleball users for the past few years, and I know it is a growing sport, and I appreciate that. But I don't want other things to get in the way of, I want other emphasis to also be put on the younger people in our area as well, though I should say that pickleball seems to be very popular across the age groups. Which I am glad to see some emphasis put on the skate park and some expansion of that. So I very much appreciate that we're listening to the citizens and we are adjusting accordingly. Those are just a couple of the concerns I have as we continue to move forward with our Parks and Rec. Maybe can you talk a little bit about why? Because the splash, I think we changed one pool out at Chickahominy Riverfront Park to a splash pad as well.
Right.
What's the appeal of a splash pad versus a toddler pool?
It's some of it is Parks and Recreation trends that we've really seen the trend of a splash pad. It can serve a lot more ages, so everyone from the littlest kids can play in the splash pad up to the larger kids. We've really seen toddler pools go away for a number of reasons. One is it is limited in who can use it. They are a little bit difficult to maintain. There's even some safety issues. Even though they're so shallow, there's some safety issues that are involved that aren't quite as big a concern with the splash pad. So that's what a lot of people want to see. And you've seen them pop up over the years at Busch Gardens and other kind of open areas, zoos, I've seen them, but that's where most folks are going, and the trends are going towards more of the splash pad, which, can kind of more inclusive of all different ages and levels of ability. So,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
A question on the off-leash dog areas. I see the one over by the rec center is in that area where the old water tower used to be,
Yes.
and it's pretty heavily treed, which is a benefit. I'm assuming that when that thing is put in, they'll leave as many trees around it for shade as possible. But that brings me back to what you're going to find at Upper County and at there, and the existing one that's just been built over at Veterans Park, and that is the surface, and when it gets to be wet and chewed up, whether there's any aspect been given to studying what other parks have done as to different types of surfaces. I know sometimes they use mulch as opposed to trying to maintain grass because it gets torn up, but it still gets muddy. And I understand that there's some places that do some sorts of artificial turf. What is the Parks and Rec thought process in planning these out as to how you might tackle those different problems at each one?
Right, and we've been looking into the different types of surfaces. Like you said, it can range anywhere from an artificial turf that it can be pouring down rain and the dogs can go on. Obviously, there's a cost factor associated with that. So that's certainly, as we get closer to a design, we would look at that. But that is probably one of the biggest parts of those dog areas that we need to continue to research and look at other parks and see what they do. They all seem to have their pros and cons of different types of materials that you can use out there. And just to circle back to the shade, we do intend on keeping that forested area at the rec center.
Is the one up at Upper County Park being built in an area that's treed or still just open field?
It's kind of a new growth forest area right now. It's an old field, so there is an opportunity to select trees that are there to keep them there. A lot of it's brush, kind of 2-3 inch wide trees growing up, but there are some larger trees in that area, so we could be selective in how we plan that. So
that would be helpful. Thank you.
I do have one quick question, if I might. Could you repeat for me just real quickly the additions to Upper County that you were talking about?
Absolutely.
The dog off leash, and what were the other ones?
Absolutely. We're considering the conversion of the toddler pool, the baby pool at Upper County Park, to a splash pad.
Right.
The off-leash area, the paved multi-use trail, which we really there is a real lack of paved multi-use trails in that portion of the county. The addition next to the existing basketball courts of some more court space. So we kept it kind of open with pickleball or tennis, but it would essentially, there's already a pad there for another court space next to that. We added an archery area for our county programs. We've hosted archery programs for some time, and it's bounced around from War Hill to Little Creek. We have a temporary setup now at Upper County, so this would be kind of a permanent home for that. Out of the way, and then just a maintenance area for our park staff. So.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to put a plug in. We need some help up at the Upper County Park. We're going to be getting about 1,800 more homes over here as Stonehouse is built out. So I think the need is going to increase over at Upper County. So thank you for all you're doing to look into these things. I think the archery component would be great because I know a lot of my grandkids would use it. They love archery. So anyway, putting a plug in for them. But thank you. I appreciate all the updates.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a resolution in our packet supporting the update. Anybody ready?
Motion for approval?
We have a motion to approve. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. So now we move on to board requests and directives. Mr. Eisenhower, do you have anything? Nothing today? Okay.
Good.
No? Okay.
Just very quickly, Mr. Pearce and I went out last week, and you all may have noticed for some time a display on property that is at not really the corner, but to the when you turn on Neckaland Road, there of some American flag and soldiers, that type of thing. There is a plan underway for an Iwo Jima memorial there, and Mr. Pearce and I went out and walked the property, and with the person who is the president of the board that is trying to get that done, and he is working with Mr. Pearce to make a presentation to the board. That will be in the near future. Did you all set up a final date for that, Mr. Pearce? And will that be in February?
Yeah, I haven't confirmed, but that's the plan.
Okay, thank you so much. And then also had my Tourism Council meeting last week. I think you all probably heard up to date. We did have a presentation from the Student Youth Travel organization. They talked about the student travel is starting back. It's not where it was, but they are seeing some increase in student travel and do expect that to grow throughout 2022, 2023. We'll see what these new variants do. And then also Ms. Sadler and I participated in a Zoom with a group of citizens last week that we were requested to participate in. So thank you.
Sue, did you have anything you'd like, Ms. Sadler?
Yes, please. I attended virtually the EDA meeting and just wanted to report that there was a inducement resolution for an $8 million bond for Blaine Landing, and they'll be coming to us within the next couple of months for approval. And also the EDA approved a request to extend the sales agreement study period for the property under contract for James River Commerce. And then this week I'll be doing my AFD meeting and the jail meeting with Mr. Stevens tomorrow. But and congratulations, Ms. Larson, on completing your VACo certification. Your colleagues are very proud of you, and thank you for your participation in that.
Thank you.
Let me just report on a couple of meetings I attended. Last week, I attended the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization meeting, followed by the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission meeting. A lot of discussion of transportation issues, obviously, but also considerable interest in what's going on legislatively in Richmond, and a good opportunity to interact with other members of the region. We heard a very interesting briefing on economic development, including a fascinating report on the Virginia ports, which was presented by Stephen Edwards, the CEO of the Virginia Port Authority. And then I wanted to take a moment to recognize that we lost another distinguished citizen, Bill Person, who served as both Commonwealth's attorney and then later as a judge for us locally. But after his retirement, moved, I believe, to California for a number of years, passed away recently. If you have not had the opportunity to see the obituary that he wrote himself, it is a fascinating and very unique document. So I think it's important to recognize the many contributions that he made as a member of the court system here in the Williamsburg, James City County area, and wish his family well. Thank you. And that's it. Mr. Stevens, do you have a report to the county administrator?
Nothing to share with you today, sir.
Okay. With that, I would look for a motion to go into closed session for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia and pertaining to 6616 Cranston Mill Pond Road, as well as property along the Brickbat Road corridor, Jamestown Road corridor, and the Forge Road corridor. Also for consideration of a personnel matter, the appointment of individuals to county boards and/or commissions pursuant to Section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia and pertaining to the Planning Commission, and consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to Section 2.23711A8 of the Code of Virginia, and discussion of the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds, including interviews of bidders or offerers, and discussion of the terms and scope of such contract, where discussion in open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.23711A29 of the Code of Virginia. So we're hitting a lot of different sections of that code. Do I have a motion to go into closed session? Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great. Okay. Back to session and look for a motion to certify.
Chair, I certify that we only spoke about those matters that we said that we would.
Thank you. We have a motion to certify the closed session. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we adjourn until 8 a.m. on February 3rd, 2022 for the local government day at the Capitol.
Motion to adjourn. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
So adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.